Well, I think we can get started. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or wherever you're located. And I'm welcoming you today to the webinar, which is the Nonviolence Travel for People, Rights, and the Lessons from History and Today's. I will leave the floor to Zumretai for the opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Francesca, and it's a pleasure to be here with such brilliant speakers and allies from different movements. So good afternoon, colleagues and friends. My name is Zumretai Erkin. I'm the Vice President of the World Uyghur Congress, which is an international umbrella organization, basically defending the rights of the Uyghurs at the international level. And it's really an honor for me to facilitate today's discussion with fellow activists from unrepresented communities, Assyrian, West Papuan, Tibetan, and Uyghurs, each carrying a generations of resilience, creativity, and hope. And I think today's discussion is really important because I think that some people have the tendency to romanticize armed struggles and armed resistance. And there's a certain misconception that nonviolent actions cannot achieve much, that they're passive movements. But I believe, on the contrary, that we have witnessed how nonviolence and nonviolent action can create lasting impact. And in truth, there are acts of extraordinary courage, movements that turn pain into purpose, resilience and oppression into organizing. They remind us that the greatest revolutions in history didn't begin with armies, they began with human conscience. From Gandhi's Salt March to the singing revolutions of the Baltics to our own people's struggle from recognition and unity, nonviolence has always been the language through which the voiceless speak truth to power. It's not the absence of resistance, it's actually the refusal to lose our humanity while fighting for justice. For the Uyghur movement, nonviolence is at the core of our campaign. Even in the face of mass detention, enforced disappearances, and a state campaign to erase our identity, Uyghurs around the world continue to choose peaceful advocacy through international law, storytelling, and solidarity building. We've seen how words, art, digital mobilization can pierce even the world's most fortified walls of silence. So today we have three different speakers. Dr. Eden Nabi reminds us that cultural preservation is resistance, that keeping language and memory alive is a deeply nonviolent act. Mr. Herman Waigai and the West Papuan movement show us that being in exile can be transformed into a platform for global solidarity and call to action. And Mr. Dorji Tetin demonstrates how the Tibetan struggles continues to build democratic institutions in exile, proving that nonviolence can shape government as well as protest. And each of our movements tell the world that even without a recognized state, we can have power without resorting to violence. And as unrepresented peoples, part of the UNPO, movements, we are often excluded from decision-making spaces. That's why we created our own in the 90s. But by organizing, documenting, and uniting across our causes, we create new forms of representation built on justice, empathy, endurance, and compassion. So as we begin, I invite all of us today to reflect on one question. How can unrepresented peoples and nations continue to resist without hate and build power without violence in an age where injustice is global, but solidarity can be too. So thank you all, and I welcome to this discussion of courage, connection, and conscience all our speakers, and I also encourage our participants to engage and interact with the brilliant lineup of speakers that we have today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Zumretai, for the beginning. And I'm going to leave the floor to our first speaker. Her name is Dr. Eden Nabi. She's a cultural historian in the Middle East and Central Asia. Edenabi began her career as a Peace Corps volunteer in Afghanistan and moved on to Columbia University PhD. That led eventually to her application of ethnic and religious minority studies, principal to the study of the Assyrian in the Middle East. I leave you the floor, and I will share the PowerPoint.
Thank you very much, Francesca, and thank you to the UNPO, Carlo Gandra, Secretary General of the AUA, and also to the moderator who so ably introduced the topic to us. My presentation on the Assyrians is, I hope, within the time limit, and I want to begin by explaining who the Assyrians are for those of you who may not be so familiar with them and why they are so significant in the Middle East. The Assyrians are the last ethnic group preserving Aramaic as a spoken and written language. This is the oldest written Semitic language in the world. First, Assyrians are the first political entity to accept Christianity in the 1st century AD through the kingdom of Edessa. Their homeland is in the Middle East, in Mesopotamia, which in Greek is the land between the two rivers, and in our language, Aramaic, the word is Bet Nahrain, the Euphrates and Tigris rivers being the area in which the Assyrians have inhabited for millennia. The continuous written history from Akkadian stone inscriptions to periodicals to online blogs and programs. So it's a very long written history. My guess is the oldest in the world that we can document. Today, the Assyrians are a diasporic people due to the Zimmi status ascribed to them during the periods of increased Muslim fundamentalism. Major genocide during World War I, led by the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman military, cut the number of Assyrians at that time by 2/3. This is the largest concentration of Assyrians in Iraq, dropped from 1.2 million to the present day 200,000 in about 20 years ago with the turmoil that was occurring in Iraq. Just to give you an example of how the importance of Aramaic, this chart from the 1st century shows the areas in red where Aramaic was spoken. That doesn't mean that it was the exclusive language spoken, because there was Greek also spoken in those areas, but it is a very dominant language, especially for trade, and there are just thousands of records about it. Assyrians, following the World War I genocides, engaged in armed struggle for a brief period of time, but as British interest in supporting indigenous Christians of the Middle East declined, there was little availability of arms and organization to continue the struggle. Self-determination transformed into cultural autonomy within existing states like Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Diaspora took a heavy toll on cultural survival, as have waves of Muslim fundamentalism and forced assimilation, especially in Iraq. Where and how Assyrians flourished in the Middle East in the 20th century is a key to understanding why there is a diaspora. In Iran, survivors of the genocide were allowed to return and reclaim their properties, establish schools, periodicals, and enter professions. This was an exception. In Turkey, Assyrians were not allowed to return to their villages, and the villages and churches remain abandoned, with few communities remaining in major towns. In Iraq, a massacre occurred in 1933 of helpless, unarmed Assyrians, women and children, men, people who had been displaced. And the policy of Arabization that followed meant that there were divisions created by the state in order to reduce ethnic identity and representation. And this division occurred through the recognition of patriarchal churches, which is an imitation of the Ottoman millet system. In Syria, the situation was similar to Iraq: denial of identity as Assyrians only as separate Christian sects. Internal debates about nonviolence have existed in the Assyrian community during the 20th century. How to protect the community especially after 1933 in Iraq, that marked the erosion of financial support for armed struggle. So, in other words, it was difficult to raise money for this, even though at that point there was a very important organization in the United States that began directly as a result of that massacre of 1933. The example of success in Iran along cultural lines encouraged other Assyrian communities to seek similar avenues of survival, that is, in the diaspora as well. And this is especially true in the former Soviet Union and in the Caucasus, which were then part of it. The attack on Assyrians and Yazidis by ISIS jihadists 2014 to the present in Iraq and Syria raises questions about joining Kurdish SDF to fight ISIS. This is supported by the United States military. However, SDF, as a primarily Kurdish nationalist organization in Syria, stifles Assyrian schools in Syria as part of their confrontation with Damascus. So we can see that the debate on nonviolence and the debate on possibly joining in arms with fellow dissidents has not been terribly successful. However, successful nonviolent strategies have shown the way to the future. In Iran, especially after World War II and until 1979, there was an elected ethno-religious representative of Assyrians in the legislature. This is a position that has remained even after the establishment of the Islamic regime. There was a network of private schools in key community locations, especially in oil-producing areas. And these schools produced some very important leaders of today. Strong church organizations existed, but they worked cooperatively, unlike in Iraq and Syria. Cultural organizations and local communities tied nationally, that is in Iran, through an organization which is called Mutwa. Printing of books, periodicals, calendars, all of which increased historical knowledge among Assyrians themselves and their neighbors, were a key factor, especially from the 1950s onward. Sponsorship of athletic teams in annual games, such as the Nisan and Tammuz Summer Games, were another way in which the community rallied and self-identified. The Assyrian National Choir, popular Assyrian music, art galleries to promote talent of members were other key factors in this movement to preserve culture. Assyrian values and sectarian divisions. Assyrians, unfortunately, although they are Christians and therefore had to love them, their neighbors and themselves, they have 5 patriarchal churches plus Protestant churches. This kind of denominational difference in the community provides opportunities for division on a political level and even in cultural matters, although that is beginning to subside in the 21st century. Central governments in Iraq, Syria, Turkey exploit these patriarchal divisions to deny Assyrian ethnic identity. The results have been weak representative in government structures, lack of unified goals, weak response to confiscation of Assyrian lands in northern Iraq, diaspora fundraising is affected also by competing patriarchal structures. I must say, though, that the patriarchs have, at least several of them, have relocated to Iraq itself, which is a good step in bringing together the elements that build our cultural community. The role of technology is absolutely critical to the diasporic Assyrian community. Internet communication has become critical since the 1980s. International programming and distribution of programs is widespread in the community. Focus groups communicate across international boundaries. Informal study groups have risen. Language preservation is a key factor that is promoted by technology. And technological translation across the diaspora, especially from Arabic, Swedish, German, French, and etc., is a key factor in building the community of people along cultural lines. Digitization of rich manuscript, print, and music have passed on the ability of the community to preserve itself. Some of these digitization projects are at Harvard University because we have small endowments that allow for this. I'm going to some examples of the kinds of activities that take place with regard to the preservation of language and history are the Betkano Children's Language Instruction, which originates in Syria, and it takes the shape of both comic books as well as songs and music in the Assyrian languages, the two dialects of the Assyrian language. A series of history classes originating from Chicago through the Assyrian Cultural Foundation are building a better knowledge in the community of their past and recent histories. Diasporic national and international organizations help to promote cohesion as well as representation. The Assyrian Universal Alliance, which I believe is represented as UNPO, is a key organization that helped to stabilize both holidays, calendars, flag, and so forth. The Assyrian American National Federation, resulting from the massacre in Somalia in 1933 in Iraq, has been a key organization to promote both knowledge and culture. Painting and music promote Assyrian history and culture in ways that were not apparent to us when they first began in the 1950s. However, today we have the Assyrian Arts Institute, which does a great deal of, expends a great deal of effort on producing Assyrian music. And this, we have an example of The Joy of Christmas by Assyrian Women's Choir, which is an international choir. I'm still not quite sure, because I'm not so technologically able, how they managed to create a choir that goes from Australia to Russia to Europe and to the United States. We also have paintings by a very important dentist, an Assyrian from Iraq, who has become really iconic in the community for both his style and for his subject matter. Paul Beto lives in the Los Angeles area. To conclude, Assyrians have entered a new era in the 21st century by building close ties across their diaspora in Russia, Armenia, Georgia, Europe, the US, Australia, with their Middle East counterparts. They are discovering the power of the arts to promote their culture. They are, however, in danger of assimilation that could reduce their ability to retain Aramaic, their heritage language. Some of this problem is being addressed through use of Assyrian history and language through the public school system in the United States, but that's a very new development. The use of technologies which help to communicate and preserve culture is absolutely critical to such a diasporic community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nabi. And I'm gonna move on to the second speaker. It goes out. 1 second. Okay. To Herman Wange. Herman Wange is a West Papuan leader, activist who is dedicated to the peaceful struggle of the West Papua self-determination. He has a long promoted nonviolent resistance and human rights for his people. He continued his advocacy as a founder and executive director of the West Papua Human Rights Center in Washington, D.C. The floor is yours, Herman. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you so much, Francesca, and also thank you so much for our dear brothers and sisters from the UNPO and friends. Yeah, it's an honor. It was honor to be part of this conversation, and let us learn together. So it's amazing. I would love to say, in Tok Pidgin, in Melanesian Tok Pidgin in the Pacific region, they say, "Big Pala, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my people's story." So as you already know, that's when we're talking about the West Papua, some of you already know the West Papua is still ruled colonized by Indonesian governments. My involvement in West Papuan struggle since 1988, when I was a young as a student at one of the university in West Papua. So today, after almost 37 years, my activism works in West Papua. My principle for tell the story, say my people struggle, is similar that we learn from the was history from the Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King from the American Civil Rights Movement here. So when we're talking about the nonviolence resistance in Melanesia on West Papua, it has been the foundation of our struggle for self-determination in West Papua. When I use West Melanesia, it's referred to West Papua because the proclamation, since the proclamation of the Republic of West Melanesia on December 14, 1988, led by the late Dr. Tom Waingai, is one of the West Papuan leader. Is West Papuan people, we recognize him as our father of the nonviolence movement in West Papua. So we learn from his leadership and we learn from our people struggle, and our commitment has been rooted in peaceful means to assert our identity as a Melanesian, dignity and right to self-determination as Melanesian people. We do believe about when we're talking about the self-determination, it's a lot of theory and terminology described it, but I do believe as a Melanesian people and as a UNPO belief and my people believe about the self-determination. That's why we've been fighting for. We've been fighting for against Indonesian government because we believe the Indonesian government is our colonize government. It's foreign people control my people, West Papuan people. So since Dr. Tom Wainga is our non-violent leader, facing cost him his life since when he established the independence of West Papua. He was arrested and imprisoned for 20 years by the Indonesian government, and later, killed. Killed by Indonesian government while in custody. But today his legacy remain alive in our movement today in West Papuan people. So in response for the nonviolence resistance today, or to respond to his sacrifice and leadership, we established one of the organizations that we promote in West Papua. We call West Papua National Authority. So I one of the co-founder for this organization. We call West Papua National Authority to continue advocating for non-violence within West Papua. Now I've been living in exile. Yeah, I have work to promote, continue promote and this principle through the creation of civil rights organizations and institutions, including the West Papua Human Rights Center, like what Fraser mentioned earlier, that we are established here in the US. And also the West Papua Radio Community Program in Australia, when we escaped to Australia in 2006. So this platform is focused on education, diplomacy and training, and of course, solidarity building, which we believe are essential tools for peaceful resistance when we talk about the non-violence. So today, despite we learn from the other people's struggle, despite facing a brutal repression from the Indonesian government, today we learn that, including military violence and systemic human rights abuses, we have remained committed to our non-violence. Our people have endured the unimaginable suffering. Yet many continue to organize, like myself and other friends, to organize a peaceful protest, human rights campaigns, and cultural expression of the resistance across West Papua, or even in abroad in the Pacific region, particularly. We face the challenge, and also we face in our daily activities. So of course, internal debates do exist within our movement, especially in West Papua, with over 270 tribes across West Papua. Unity in both is unity is both our strength and our challenge. In some remote regions, we learn that armed resistance has emerged through groups like the West Papuan Liberation Army, or TPNOP, they call. This reality reflects this desperation of our community facing violence, occupation for being a long time, almost 60, 70 years right now. However, as a leader, but of course as a spokesperson of as a Republic of Melanesia, facing violence, occupation, or someone who has lived in this struggle, like you already know, both the inside or outside our homeland. We continue. I continue to advocate for non-violence resistance, not only as a moral choice, but as a strategic path forward. So we draw deep inspiration from leaders, like I mentioned earlier, from the Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., or Nelson Mandela himself, or of course, my dear uncle or our leaders, Dr. Tom Waingai, whose example remind us that lasting freedom must root in peace, justice, and dignity. Our vision for West Melanesia or West Papua is not built on revenge, but on reconciliation and recognition of our rightful place among the nation of the world. As a Melanesian people with our own history, culture, and future. Today, we are living in this era they call the development of technology. That's now, like, for example, today we can connect everybody. Today, we're talking about our story. yeah, my people land, West Papua is still, remain largely close to the international access due to the ongoing colonial system imposed by the Indonesian government. Even though, like recent days, we learned from the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York, the President of Indonesia spoke out about the Palestine, Indonesian government position on Palestine, supporting the self-determination or ongoing peaceful settlement in Israel and Palestine. But in their own eyes, they are colonized their own people, West Papuan people. Genocide has been happening there. So the system aims to isolate our people. So they close the West Papuan people from the outside because the system aims to isolate my people, our people, to prevent the international community, especially the United Nations, Human Rights Council or other human rights organizations from witnessing the reality on the ground in West Melanesia or West Papua, known today as West Papua. Like I said, when I mentioned about, I use the West Melanesia, that's I refer to West Papua. However, the development of technology today has become a powerful tool. I learn, myself, like every day I use my social media account, Facebook, to tell the story. So it's a powerful tool to, like in our struggle today. It's allow us to share our story of genocide, the ongoing human rights crisis, and the political realities that we face under the Indonesian rule. So through the social media and digital platform, we are educating our people and raising the global awareness about our non-violence resistance, what we believe. So technology has become our voice. When others try to silence us, Indonesian government to silence us, but it empower us, our movement. It connected us, like today, with their other friends, brothers and sisters, and keeps our people struggle alive in the eyes of the world. So thank you so much, and brothers and sisters, and Pio, thank you for your support. God bless.
Thank you very much, Herman. And we're going to move on to the last speaker, Dorji Tsetsen. Dorji is a member of the 17th Tibetan Parliament in Exile and a Tibetan activist. He was previously the executive director of Students for Free Tibet, another organization advocating for Tibet freedom and human rights. The floor is yours, Dorji.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be on this platform meeting you all, and very good to see Zumratai. We work very closely for different campaign. So to begin with, I'm speaking from Dharamsala, India, which is the capital of Tibetan exile movement. We have Tibetan government in exile base here, also known as Central Tibetan Administration. And His Holiness Dalai Lama lives in Dharamsala. And I'm a Tibetan born, brought up in exile. My parents escaped Tibet when His Holiness, came into exile around same time. And I was born here. And so I continue to, work in the movement. So for anyone who may be less familiar with Tibet, I'll just give a brief facts and statistic before getting into the core subject of the non-violence movement, how Tibetans, work. So before China's occupation, Tibet was an independent country with its own government and legal system. Tibet managed its own domestic and foreign affair, coming to, make treaties with different countries. It has its own tax system, currency, postal services, issued passport, and so and so. And His Holiness Dalai Lama was the spiritual and both political leader, even though he was very young. And Tibet as a country is a very, very big landmass. Like it has 2.5 million square kilometers. And Tibet traditionally region consists of 3 traditional regions, Yutsang, Kham, and Amdo. So after China's occupation of Tibet, Tibet was divided into different region, different administrative area, so-called Tibetan Autonomous Region, which you may now see China put it as like Xizang. And other part of the Tibet was also included into other provinces of Qinghai, Sichuan, Gansu, and Yunnan, as how colonial power rule, in terms of the land by dividing into different, regions. So that's how Tibet is being occupied right now. So under the direct occupation of Tibet, over 1.2 1.2 million Tibetans have died, directly, indirectly, because of the occupation. More than 2.5 million Tibetans have been forcibly reallocated. The nomadic community, which is a primary like Tibetan for thousands of years being practiced, has been like forcibly reallocated, mainly to exploit the natural resources by Chinese government. Tibetans have continually protest and call for freedom. You may know that over 150 Tibetans have self-immolated by protesting Chinese rule. And currently, right now, as we speak, over 1 million Tibetan children are being forcibly taken into Chinese colonial boarding school. And parents have no choice. All the schools in the villages, primary schools, are being shut down. Regional, schools run by the local community are being forcibly shut down. So they have no choice but to send to this colonial boarding school. As young as child, 4 years old, are being forced into, and parents have no choice. And this is a policy that Xi Jinping, after taking its rule, has implemented this policy starting 2016. And we are advocating for the Tibetan children's rights globally. And we have also issued report and research work on that in terms of policy and how it's being implemented in terms of the core objective of completely eradicating Tibetan identity and culture, having no right to learn about Tibetan language, but also not having the right to live and grow up with your family, your parents. Imagine you cannot live with your mother and you are being taken away into this boarding school, which is a colonial in terms of the objective. And Tibetan natural resources are being explored. Mining, illegal dams are being built, mainly to feed China's industrial greed. Not for the Tibetans, but how China wanted to produce this cheap product and exploit the natural resources, which Tibetans on the ground are protesting to protect their land. So these are like some of the unimaginable atrocities that are being carried out for decades inside Tibet. But despite that, Tibetans have continuously fight for our freedom through nonviolence as a path, mainly under the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. One of the most recent historic uprising that happened inside Tibet was in 2008 during the Beijing Olympics, when China wanted to show the world how it has, the economy, military power, and through this game using as a tool, Tibetans have rose up across 3 traditional regions, hundreds and thousands of Tibetans, and about 70% of Tibetans who took part in that protest and uprising were young Tibetan, younger generation who were actually born and brought up in the Chinese occupation. So they reject China's rule. And so we, as the Tibetans in exile, continuously raise voices for the Tibetan people inside Tibet. But one of the most important is how Tibetans have, built and strengthened our culture, our language, our religion, and art as the biggest tool for the nonviolence resistance. How our culture and religion and social institution has become a nonviolent resistance hub. That's why China feels so threatened, and that's why these policies are being implemented to completely wipe out Tibetan identity. But at the same time, our culture and our identity has been the biggest strength, and we continue to, preserve that. So when we came into exile under the leadership of His Holiness Dalai Lama, it was in 1959 when His Holiness came into exile. As soon as he came to exile, we, under the support of government of India as well, we established schools in India, Nepal, in the refugee community. Even right now, we have over 55 Tibetan schools across India and Nepal, which Tibetan government in exile run. And we have Tibetan settlements, refugee community across these countries. And we have under Central Tibet administration, under 253 monasteries and nunneries across India, Nepal, Bhutan, which is a culture hub. So when cultural revolution happened inside Tibet, as I mentioned earlier, over 6,000 monasteries are destroyed. We kind of revived Tibetan culture and identity through our leadership of His Holiness and the Buddhist leader and the religious leader. How we revive the Tibetan culture and identity in exile, how we preserve it here. And Central Tibetan administration has been managing, and as we advocate for our freedom, we do like global campaign across the world. Our primary responsibility how to take care of the Tibetan community in different part of the world. We have like 13 different Tibet offices around the world, including India, Nepal, in Switzerland, in DC, of course, in US, Tokyo, to London, to Paris, and to Australia, to South Africa as well, and Taiwan. So these offices actually work as the embassies of Tibet, as a representative of His Holiness. And now, as Tibetan diaspora community has been spread across, like I think over 25 countries, through that we have associations and how they continue to build grassroots level democratic institution where we continue to build our community, and then language classes and schools in all these like different countries we built. And as I mentioned about the Tibetan democracy, so His Holiness introduced Tibetan democracy, but in 2011 he completely devolved political authority. And he said, this is time now for elected leader to, carry forward the Tibetan movement. So we have a president, which is being directly elected by the people, and parliament, as myself, as a member, being elected by the Tibetan, because Tibetan inside Tibet cannot participate, but they do follow, very closely in terms of the Tibetan democracy in exile. So even though we don't have a land as a state, but we function as a state in terms of in representing our people. So every 5 years we have this election coming in, and next year will be our again election to for the new president as well as for the parliament. And in terms of how president, and we have departments which like Department of Security, Department of Information, International Relations, Education, Home, Finance. It's a democratic institution how our president as an executive runs the government, but every budget, every finance has to be approved by the parliament. So parliament will oversee the Tibetan the executive, as well as we have the Chief Justice Commission. Any like issues within the movement, whatnot, that can also hear through that Justice Commission. And we have independent bodies like Election Commission, Audit Commission, as well as like Public Service Commission as part of the democratic institution. So as I mentioned about the Tibetan exile, institution, we also have a very vibrant civil societies. We have youth organization, women organization. We have Tibetan support group across the world, which at the end like come as like Tibetan government exile as the umbrella organization to run. So yeah, I mean, because of the time, I can stop here, and I'll happy to take up a question from you. But at the end, I would just like to quote a simple message from His Holiness. What he said, I quote, is the spirit of unity among Tibetans in Tibet is very strong. The hardship and adversity we face give rise to something positive, a strong sense of unity among Tibetans across 3 provinces of Tibet, with an unwavering courage and determination. The just cause of Tibet will never wipe out. The truth is something that will in time gain momentum and comes into light. People may use arms to suppress the truth, but the impact of violence does not last long. In our struggle for just cause of Tibet, instead of taking arms, we yield to the power of truth to fight for our cause. So this is what His Holiness, preaches us. And because of that, both inside and outside, we are very hopeful. And even though it's very challenging, but at the same time, our hope is very strong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorji, for your presentation. I would like to leave the floor if any other participant had a question for the speakers. What? I don't see anyone. Well, if not, I want to thank you, all the speakers, for sharing your experience, insights, and the courage with us today. Each one of your stories, from the Assyria to the West Papua to the Tibet, has shed a light on the strength, and it takes a lot of strength to pursue the justice and self-determination through peaceful means. As we wrap up this discussion today, we are reminded that nonviolence is not passivity, it is courage in action. All your experience show that as the peaceful resistance can reclaim dignity, build community, and advance the right to self-determination, even in the face of oppression. I want to, again, sincerely thank all our speakers today, and thank you for joining us during those webinars that we've been organizing with the UNPO. And I invite you to also follow us through social media or newsletter as we continue share new webinars in the upcoming weeks. Thank you again, and have a good day, evening, night. I'm assuming we're all in different time zones. Thank you, everyone.